Have you noticed at retail just how much nostalgia product is out there? I mean, I'm not just talking like one or two things, but like literally being able to go to the toy aisle and buy the same exact toy that you had as a child. This isn't just like a once and done flash in the pan trend. We're seeing this as an ongoing play pattern. Well, where did this come from and how did we get here? Let's look at it on Spector Creative. Hey guys, welcome back to Spector Creative with me, Scott Toy Guru Neitlich. I'm your host. I'm a toy maker. I'm a toy collector. It gives me a bit of a unique voice here on the channel. I'm also an author. I have some great books on Amazon written for people like you, toy fans, movie fans. Fall of the West has just been released. It is an action adventure, Die Hard in a medieval city. It's about the fall of Constantinople, and yeah, you'll love it. It's a fast, super cool, plain read, and link is in the description. Available on Amazon now. All right, thanks for letting me plug my own books there. What I'm talking about today is the reemergence of toys we already own on toy aisles now, here in 2025. Now, we've always kind of had this. I mean, they usually call them homages or repros, reproductions. It's a nostalgia based concept, and it's to get you to buy a toy that you already own to maybe keep it for yourself or pass it on to a child, saying, hey, I love Rock'em Sock'em Robots. You should like it too. And look, it's in a box, just like I remember. I mean, this isn't limited to the toy industry. I mean, look, cereal does this all the time with vintage boxes. It's meant to bring back that a feeling of a safer time, and we're going to put a pin in that because we're going to get to that in a moment. It's quite important. So we're seeing this across the board. Girls, boys, plush, wheels, blasters. I mean, almost every aisle seems to have repros of toys we had back in the 70s, 80s, and now even 90s. And one thing is there's a bit of a 30-year cycle for nostalgia. So we are now entering nostalgia for the late 90s, early 2000s. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to start to see Clone Wars and Attack of the Clones merchandise and Lord of the Rings becoming, nostalgic now. It's crazy to think about that. I mean, hell, there's probably so many people watching this channel that weren't even alive when those movies came out. Makes me feel old. Anyway, where were you in 77? Okay, I wasn't born either. I was born in 78. The point is, I've had Star Wars my whole life, and a lot of people are born into it. It's kind of like cell phones, you have digital natives, these kids born today that have never known the world without a smartphone. It's a very different experience than us old folks that, went from having a rotary phone to the most powerful computer in the world in our pocket. Okay, I'm off topic. So let's get back to talking about vintage figures. And this comes in a couple different shapes and sizes. You have your direct reproductions, complete all the way down to package. And you have your, what I'd call homages, like this hammerhead here, right? Even his eyes pointing to the left, just like the original toy did. So why is this suddenly becoming a much bigger thing? Like I said, we've had, reproductions for years, but you didn't really see this like in the 70s, right? The 30-year gap would put you in the 50s, or in the 80s would put you in the 50s. So, but we didn't see that. It's like you didn't see Howdy Doody and Davy Crockett toys being sold in the 80s as a nostalgia kick. But we're seeing that more and more now. So what changed? Well, honestly, COVID. A big part of the boom in adult collectors was COVID. So you might be like, well, what? Well, obviously, during the lockdown, a lot of us were obviously home, whether we were working remotely or just home by ourselves or with our family. Being able to purchase toys, and usually through Amazon, not even having to go to a toy store, were a way of physically holding on to something that brought us back to our youth. It's like I remember, twisting R2D2 and the shine off of his dome like this. It brings back those memories. And when you're going through, the crap that we all went through during the lockdown, you want to feel happy and nostalgic from better times. So so many adults started turning to toys, and it was sort of their intro might have been a vintage reproduction, but then they started realizing, oh, but there's like new versions of characters I love out there. Like they're still making Star Wars and He-Man toys, and G.I. Joe's on shelf now? What? I mean, yeah, most of the public is not, it doesn't have the nerd, knowledge base that we do. But yeah, you walk into the toy aisle and it's amazing the evergreen brands are the same ones that were around in the 80s for the most part. Power Rangers came around in the 90s, but, Jurassic Park in the 90s. But other than that, yeah, you don't really see too many brand new brands that have been created post 2000. And not only was the availability of repros very alluring to, people trapped mentally and physically in their homes, but things like Lego, things like board games, things like Nerf started really taking off because, again, it was something to do. It was an activity, usually an activity that didn't take up much space or didn't cause a mess. Lego and Nerf adjusting for that. And that's why, I mean, I've made a few videos talking about how the Toy Association of America is now showing that almost 50% of toy purchases at retail are for self as opposed to for a kid. And they're, these are 15-year-olds and up. So that's the purchase that's considered for an adult collector, 15 and up and purchase for self. As opposed to if an adult buys a toy but is buying it for a child, they're not considered an adult collector. They're just a purchaser. So because of COVID, we saw this huge uptick in board games, construction play, especially Lego. And a big part of that was the payoff, because when you're trapped at home and you build something with Lego, boom, at the end of the day, you have a Hogwarts castle or a giant flower or the Titanic or, whatever else you build. And the payoff, I think, was a huge reason that Lego appealed to call it the COVID lockdown sufferer or customer. And it's continuing. So, the toys we're seeing now are ones that were designed 3 years ago. So 3 years ago was 2022, and COVID was kind of just ending. And toy companies were coming off these huge sales of nostalgia toys and realizing people are just clamoring for toys because it reminds them of an easier time. So lo and behold, here we are 3 years later, and the toys that were planned during the pandemic are now on shelf. And so it's basically echoing and shadowing that trend, that even if the trend died down over the past few years, which fortunately for toy companies it hasn't, but you're directly seeing that 3-year development cycle in action, where was the country 3 years ago? We were just getting over COVID and we were really into buying nostalgia toys. Boom. Well, that's what was going on 3 years ago. Look what's on shelf right now. This happens in reverse, too. A good example is the Star Wars Evolutions packs. There's 3 packs from like 10 years ago. When they first made them, and it was usually like 3 versions of one character, like Anakin as, a Jedi, or like episode 2, episode 3, and then Darth Vader. Or, I think they had one of 3 Padmes or X-Wing pilots. Point being is they were meant to be like one character's evolution, and they did so well. They did phenomenal. But because Hasbro only planned them for a 1-season SKU, the next year they didn't have any. It took 2.5 years before they came back to market, because once they saw they were a hit, they started making more, but it takes 2 years to go from concept to shelf. So there was a gap between the success of the first Evolutions pack and being able to get them on shelf again. Not only does that reinforce that whole 2-year gap, but it shows that in that time, people actually had changed their mind and they weren't as into the Evolution packs anymore. So by the time they came back, they sort of missed the while the iron was hot, if you will. So the same thing is happening now with nostalgia toys. They were so hot during the pandemic that everyone was developing them for the next toy season, which at the time was 2025. And luckily, that trend hasn't died. If it did, you'd see a lot more nostalgia toys on clearance. But fortunately, it's still a hit, and I guess some good things did come out of the lockdown, and that's toy sales are just up. Toy sales for self are up, and the interest in rebuying toys we had as a kid, from Care Bears to Mr. Potato Head to Wicket to Leonardo and Donatello. I mean, they're all on shelf now, again, which is crazy. But until you kind of think about it and realize what was happening 2-3 years ago when these toys were developed, it all makes sense. All right, well, I hope that was kind of a good inside look into not only the development cycle, but yeah, how events really shape society and toy purchases. It's all one big ball of toy fun. All right. Thank you for watching. Thanks for supporting my books on Amazon and sharing these videos. It's the best way to support this channel, and I appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the next one.